Our new school nurse handed out anxiety patches to every kid in school, and my whole town called her a hero. But then all those kids started getting nosebleeds. I always had a weird feeling about Mrs. Vance from the day she showed up at the start of my sophomore year. Within a month, every single kid I knew was talking about her. She was the cool nurse, the one who actually got it. She let kids hang out in her office during lunch if they said they were stressed. She wrote passes out of class for mental health breaks without making anyone explain. She kept little snacks in a basket on her desk. She had a poster on her wall that said, "Your feelings are real," in soft cursive. Parents loved her too. My friend Iris's mom told my mom that Mrs. Vance had finally taken Iris's anxiety seriously. Unlike every other adult in this town. The principal mentioned her in the morning announcements at least once a week, but something about Mrs. Vance felt wrong to me from the day I first walked into her office. Maybe it was the way she sized you up while smiling, like she was guessing your weight. Maybe it was the patches. The patches were her thing. Small beige squares about the size of a quarter, packed in little white envelopes with her own initials written on them in marker. She handed them out to any student who came in saying they felt overwhelmed. Anxiety patches, she called them. FDA cleared, completely natural, very gentle. She said you wore one behind your ear for a school day, and it would take the edge off. She told you that if it worked, you should come back the next morning for another one. Every kid I knew was wearing one by November. I didn't take any. I asked Mrs. Vance once what was actually in them, and she smiled at me and said, "Don't worry your pretty little head about the science of it, honey. If it works, it works." She closed the lid of the basket while she said it, like I wasn't supposed to look at them too closely. I told my mom about that conversation the same night. My mom told me Mrs. Vance had probably been having a long day and that I was being too hard on her. She reminded me that the school had been begging for a nurse like Mrs. Vance for years. Iris started wearing the patches in October. Iris was the kind of person who laughed at her own jokes before the punchline, who would text me at midnight just to tell me about a weird thing her cat had done. Within 3 weeks, she was a different person. She was tired all the time. She stopped texting me after 8 in the evening because she said she was already in bed. She started getting nosebleeds in the middle of class, the kind that wouldn't stop for almost 10 minutes. And Mrs. Vance would write her a pass to the nurse's office to lie down. Twice I sat with her in there. The first time her nose dripped onto the front of her shirt before she even noticed it was happening. The second time her hands were so cold she couldn't unzip her backpack. Mrs. Vance came in both times and smiled at me like nothing was wrong. Mrs. Vance gently suggested to Iris's mom that they sign up for the after-school wellness program. She ran out of an office near the strip mall. Her mom said yes that same week. Iris was going twice a week. I asked Iris once what they actually did at those appointments. She thought about it for a long time and said, "She mostly talks to me and gives me a new kind of patch." I didn't say anything to Iris. But when I got home that night, I pulled out the patch I had taken from Mrs. Vance's basket the week before. The one I had told her I was going to try and then never put on my skin. I held it up to my desk lamp. Through the thin paper backing, I could see something inside that wasn't supposed to be there. A small dark line that looked like a tiny strip of something denser than the rest of the patch material. My aunt was a pharmacist. The next morning, instead of going to school, I drove to the pharmacy where she worked and set the patch down on her counter. I told her where it came from. I told her my best friend had been wearing one every single day for 2 months. My aunt's whole face changed. She took it into the back room. She came back out 20 minutes later holding her phone. "Don't go back to school today," she said. "Don't take any more of those. I need you to give me the names of every kid you know who is wearing one." I gave her 14 names. My aunt sent the patch and a second sealed envelope I had grabbed for backup to a lab that worked with her pharmacy chain. The lab called her 4 days later. The patches were not FDA cleared. They were not anything that should have ever been on a child. They contained a small amount of something my aunt said was meant to make people drowsy before surgery, and another thing that thinned blood, which was where the nosebleeds had been coming from. My aunt told me both substances absorbed through the skin slowly and built up in the body over time, which was why kids who started in October were so much worse off by December than the ones who started in November. She said the dosage was low enough that a single patch on a healthy adult would barely register. On a teenager, worn every day for months, with the dose climbing each week, it was a different story. Mrs. Vance had been giving symptoms to children and then billing their parents' insurance for ongoing pediatric care through her own little side office, which she had set up as a private practice that the school had never officially approved. Every nosebleed got logged as a symptom. Every wellness program visit got logged as a consultation. Every refill of the patches got logged as a treatment. The whole thing was a closed loop she had built to feed itself. The state medical board sent investigators to her office the following Monday. Mrs. Vance was at school that morning, sitting at her desk, handing out new patches, when the police walked in. They walked her out right through the main hallway. 2 officers, one on each side, and Mrs. Vance between them with her hands behind her back. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She had this calm look on her face, almost like she was being taken to a meeting she had already planned for. Before she went through the double doors at the end of the hall, she turned her head just a little and looked back toward the nurse's office like she was making sure someone would lock up. Then she was gone. For about 2 hours, I actually believed everything was going to be fine. Then lunch happened. I walked into the cafeteria and I could feel it before I even sat down. People were looking at me. Not the curious kind of looking, the other kind. The kind where you can tell people have been talking about you and they just stopped because you showed up. I sat at my usual table and a girl from my English class walked right up to me. She was holding her tray and her eyes were red like she had been crying. She looked at me and said, "She was the only person in this entire school who actually cared about us and you ruined it." She didn't wait for me to answer. She just walked away. I sat there with my lunch in front of me and I couldn't eat. I looked around the cafeteria and I could see it on other faces too. Kids whispering, kids glaring. Word had gotten out that I was the one who took the patch to a lab. I don't know how. Maybe someone heard it from a parent or maybe one of the investigators said something. It didn't matter how. What mattered was that every kid in that room thought I was the person who took away the only adult in this school who gave them the time of day, and they hated me for it. I picked up my tray and left. I went to Principal Everett's office because he had praised Mrs. Vance every week on the announcements and I thought he would back me up. He was sitting behind his desk pale, with folders spread out everywhere. He didn't smile. He just looked at me and let out a long breath through his nose. I started to tell him what was happening in the hallways. He held up his hand to stop me. This school endorsed Mrs. Vance publicly. I endorsed her. If this turns into a bigger situation, there are going to be be questions about how she was hired and who approved her programs. I need you to stop talking about this to other students. I just stared at him. He wasn't telling me to be quiet because I was wrong. He was telling me to be quiet because if I kept talking, people would start asking questions about him. I left without saying another word. I sat in my car and called Kana. I told her about the school, about the kids being mad, about Everett basically telling me to shut up. Kana listened, and then her voice changed. The lab flagged something else, she said. The second patch you gave me, the sealed one, had a higher concentration than the first. She was increasing the dosage over time. I had to put the phone down and press my forehead against the steering wheel for a second. That meant the patches Iris had been wearing in October were weaker than the ones she was wearing in December, and Iris had been wearing them every single day. After school, I drove straight to Iris's house. Deirdre opened the door. She didn't say hi. She didn't invite me in. I don't know what you think you did, she said, but Iris was getting better. She was finally getting better, and now she has no one. Then she closed the door. Not a slam, just a firm close. I stood on that porch for I don't know how long. I had taken the patch to Kana. I had given 14 names. I had done everything right, and now the kids at school thought I was a traitor. The principal wanted me to disappear, and the mother of my best friend had just shut a door in my face because she still believed that the woman who was drugging her daughter was the only person who ever cared. I drove home and found Bonnie in the kitchen. I told her everything. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Honey, I believe you, but maybe you should have brought this to me first instead of going behind everyone's back." I looked at her and said, "I did come to you months ago. I told you something was wrong with the patches and you told me I was being too hard on Mrs. Vance. That's exactly what you said." Bonnie looked away. She turned her head toward the window above the sink and didn't respond. I waited. She didn't turn back. She didn't apologize. I went to my room and sat on my bed in the quiet. The next morning, my phone buzzed during fourth period. It was Iris. "My mom says I can't talk to you anymore. She says you made everything worse." I stared at the screen. I typed 3 different responses and deleted them. I finally just typed, "I did this because you were getting nosebleeds every single day and nobody was asking why." She didn't respond. Between classes that same day, my math teacher Daryl stopped me in the hallway outside his classroom. He was holding his coffee in one hand and his laptop bag in the other. He looked at me and his face was serious but not cold. "I heard what happened," he said. "I just want you to know I had no idea. I feel terrible for what I said about her in class." I remembered exactly what he had said. He had stood in front of 30 kids and told us how lucky we were to have someone like Mrs. Vance in the building. He had said it like it was a fact. It was the first time any adult at this school had said anything even close to an apology, and I wanted it to mean more than it did. But then he leaned in a little and lowered his voice. "Just be careful. People are upset, and you are the easiest person to blame right now." He gave me this look, almost like he felt sorry for me, and then he turned and walked into his classroom. He wasn't offering to help. He wasn't saying he would talk to the other teachers or set the record straight. He was warning me, "Be careful, watch your back, you're on your own." After school, I called Kana. Before I could say anything, she said she had news. Mrs. Vance's lawyer had released a statement calling the patches herbal wellness aids, and Mrs. Vance a licensed practitioner. Kana said it was a complete lie, but it was muddying the water. "The parents who believed in her the most are the ones who will fight the hardest to say she did nothing wrong," Kana said, "because if she is guilty, then they are too." I understood exactly what she meant. If Mrs. Vance was a fraud, then every parent who signed a permission slip, every parent who let their kid wear those patches, all of them had to admit that they handed their children over to someone who was hurting them. It was easier to believe the lawyer. It was easier to blame me. I sat in my car and made a decision. I pulled up the list of 14 names I had given Kana and started texting each one of them individually. I asked if they had been feeling tired. I asked if they had been getting nosebleeds. I asked if they wanted to talk. 11 didn't reply. 3 did. One girl said she had stopped wearing the patches a week ago and still felt dizzy every morning. Meh. Another said her mom had called the doctor and they were waiting on blood test results. And then there was the freshman boy. His message came in around 9 at night. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was dying. Some 14-year-old boy I barely even knew had been walking around school for months thinking his body was shutting down. I screenshotted the messages and sent them to Kana. She texted back one line, "Keep going. This matters." The next morning, Kana called me before I even got out of bed. "The state investigators want to interview you formally. I'll be there with you, and your mom can come too if she wants." 2 of the 3 kids who had texted me back had talked to their parents, and those parents had agreed to contact the investigators on their own. Then Kana paused. One of the other parents called me directly. She said, "If my kid's name ends up in any of this, I will hold your niece personally responsible." A parent was threatening me, not Mrs. Vance, not the lawyer, a parent whose kid I had been trying to help. "Don't let threats like that stop you," Kana said. "But from now on, be careful about what you put in writing. Save everything. Screenshot everything." I told her I understood. I went to my locker that morning, and a folded piece of notebook paper fell out. The handwriting was messy, all lowercase. "You think you are a hero, but you are just a snitch who could not mind her own business." I folded it back up and put it in my backpack and kept walking. My hands were a little shaky, but I zipped the bag and closed my locker and went to first period. I was scared. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't, but I kept thinking about that freshman boy who thought he was dying. I kept thinking about the lab results and the dosage going up. I kept thinking about Iris. Being scared didn't mean I was wrong. It just meant other people weren't ready to hear the truth yet. Between second and third period, I turned a corner and saw Iris. She looked small. That was the first thing I noticed. Her clothes hung loose on her, like she had lost weight she didn't have to lose. She had dark circles under her eyes that made her look like she hadn't slept in days. Her skin looked almost gray under the hallway lights. She was back at school for the first time in a week, and she looked worse than the last time I had seen her. We saw each other at the same time and both stopped. Kids moved around us on both sides. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then Iris spoke. So quiet I almost didn't catch it. "I keep getting dizzy. Even after I stopped wearing them, something in my chest cracked open." She had stopped wearing the patches. That meant she knew, on some level, that something was wrong. But the symptoms weren't going away. "You need to see a real doctor," I said. "Not her." Iris's eyes filled up with tears. "My mom still thinks Mrs. Vance was helping me," she whispered. I grabbed her hand and held it tight. "Then we have to show her she wasn't." Iris squeezed back. After school, I drove her to Kana's pharmacy. Kana had cleared a space in the back room and printed out papers. She used plain words, instructions. She showed Iris the lab report and pointed at each substance and explained what it was actually designed to do. The first one was the kind of thing they gave you before they put you under for surgery. It slowed everything down, breathing, heart rate, the way your brain processed signals. That was why Iris had been so tired. That was why she felt like she was moving through water in class. The second one was a blood thinner, the kind they prescribed to old people after a stroke, and it was the reason her nose had been bleeding every other day for 2 months. Kana said neither of these substances should have ever been put on the skin of a teenager, not in any amount, not for any reason. She explained that they built up in the body over time, and that it took weeks for them to clear out even after you stopped, which was why Iris was still dizzy. Iris sat there the whole time without saying a single word. When Kana finished, Iris looked up. She told me it was vitamins, Iris said. She told me my body was just adjusting. That is what she wanted you to believe, Kana said. But your body was reacting to something it should never have been exposed to. Iris looked down at her hands. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. Is the damage permanent? Kana took a breath. I don't know yet. You need blood work, but I need your mom involved for that. Iris pulled out her phone and dialed Deirdre. Mom, I need you to come to the pharmacy right now. I need you to hear what the patches actually were. Deirdre walked in 20 minutes later with her arms crossed and her jaw set, ready to argue. Kana introduced herself, pulled out a chair, and walked Deirdre through everything. She showed her the chemical breakdown from the lab report. She showed her the comparison between the two patches, proving the dosage was being increased. She showed her the insurance billing records the investigators had shared with her, records showing that Mrs. Vance had been filing claims for pediatric consultations under a private practice that was never registered with the state. Deirdre's face changed slow, like watching ice melt. The tightness in her jaw loosened first, then her arms uncrossed. Then she reached for one of the papers and held it close,